Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I'm going to have a go at a couple more of the requests in a vague way because they're difficult to do specifically. One request was, how do I look after Oncidiums? Now, if you want to be specific, Oncidiums are a genus, but they're part of the Oncidium Alliance, which then starts including lots of other things. So, as I said, vaguely, I don't know whether the question was very specific or generally sort of aimed at, if you see what I mean. I mean, strictly speaking, that's a Brassia, but it's in the Oncidium Alliance. And a question like, how do I look after Oncidiums, is like, well, not as bad perhaps, but it's like asking me, how do I look after Dendrobiums? Well, which one? Which type? And it's the same with the Oncidium Alliance. Although there are many, many similarities, far more than there will be differences, there are still some variables. So when you look at Oncidiums, first of all, you need to know, have I actually got hold of an Oncidium here? Now, I was going to say, let me find one, but it's not that easy, believe it or not. You know, in that sea up there, it's virtually all Oncidium types, except for a Dendrobium tucked up the back. And, well, and a Phalaenopsis, I don't count those. But you see what I mean? I mean, this is a Miltonia, yeah? And it's sat next to what was once a true Oncidium that's just opened, by the way. But now this has been reclassified, so it's no longer an Oncidium. It's got a brand new name. Not only a new genus, but a new species name as well. It's been totally renamed. So I don't know what it's supposed to do with things like that. And then if you get up there, there's a giant Oncidium. Now that, I hope, is still an Oncidium, Sotoanum, the parent of one of the twinkles. And then up the back there's, I forget what that is. I know it's Tahitian Dancer. I don't know whether it's an Oncidium or an Oncostelli. Let me see if I can dig the tag out. I can see it, but whether I can reach it or not is a different thing altogether. Yes, I can. So what did I write on there? It's actually an Aliciera. Yeah? So that's an intergeneric. In amongst them will be intergenerics. This is where two or more genera have been crossed together, but they'll still be in the Oncidium Alliance. So you can cross a Miltonia with an Oncidium. You can cross an Oncidium with a Brassia. Yeah? And so it goes on. It's endless. And in the Oncidium Alliance, there are variables. The twinkles are Oncidium, so you can get diddy ones. They're not all giants. And what I'm going to do now is combine another request, was how do you tell good health from bad health? And when does the health of your plant become a concern or a worry? So I'll incorporate that one while I've got it in my hand. Yeah? So how's that plant doing, generally speaking? Generally speaking, it's doing very well. But some people would worry about those spots. So let's analyse where those spots are. Which leaves are they on? Are they on the new growths? No. They're on the oldest leaves on the plant. Which are the leaves most likely to drop off next? The oldest leaves, yeah? Because Oncidiums drop their leaves, they do become leafless, yeah? Totally leafless after a while. And it varies how long it takes. So I look at that plant and I think, no, there's nothing wrong with that. It's growing normally. And many of the previous growths have actually produced two new growths. So it's not only doing reasonably well, it's actually doing better than it once was. Yeah? You know, when you, a lot of Oncidiums, this is a classic example here. This one has a linear approach for me. It grows a new bulb, yeah, blooms, and then it grows another one. Never more than one. It's never grown more than one. Maybe I'm not looking after it in its perfect world. And in a better world, it might perhaps shoot out another new growth. Anyway, So some have a linear pattern, but some form a clump on the grounds that they can push out. I'm just trying to see, there's one in the middle there that's got 2 new growths. There's one there that's got 2. That one's only got 1. Well, that one's got 2. So up until recently, each growth produced a new growth, but now it's started producing 2. Yeah? In places, not all places. There may come a time when it goes back to 1. And then I would think, well, hang on, what have I changed? Is there something I'm doing different? It was starting to move towards 2 new growths per growth, which then, if you think how quickly the plant would increase its size, if it carried on doing that, you know, where there was a group of 3, yeah, with a new growth, now there's a group of 5. And then those 2 new ones produce 2 more. Yeah? You can see how quickly the plant could increase its size. You'd end up splitting it quite quick, or getting a bigger bit of wood in this particular case. So trying to tell whether a plant's doing well or not is not always obvious, and if you haven't had it long, it's very difficult because you don't know what is typical for it. And if it was nursery grown, yeah, then your conditions might not be as good. So you're never going to achieve that type of growth. You get as good as you can. And that's the goal, is to just get your plants as good as you can get them in your environment. And sometimes that might not be perfect. It might not be brilliant. It might not be good as those pictures so-and-so put up on Facebook. That's life. You know, you can, you know, none of this grow room out here is not perfect. Well, I won't say far from it, but there are deficiencies out here. There are things that could be improved if money was limitless, but it isn't, so I can't. Right, so that was a twinkle. So strictly speaking, twinkles are oncidiums. The 2 species that went into making them up were both oncidiums. So it's not an intergeneric, unless they sneakily changed one of the flipping names while I wasn't looking. Now this is another twinkle, but it's over twice as big as the one I just showed. Now what's the growth pattern on this one? In the main, the new growths are producing 1 new growth each. But there are places, if you look there, there's a cluster of 3 new growths. And it looks like they're all coming off the same previous one, but they're not, because one of them's coming off that one. So that one to the right of the shot now has that new growth on it. And that one in the centre of the shot pointing downwards now has 2. So sometimes 1, sometimes 2. And I don't ever remember noticing 2. So this one's getting a bit better. How's the health of the plant? Well, once upon a time it wasn't doing very well, was it? Just look back towards the old part of the plant. I can see brown leaf tips. I can see leaves that have been cut off, yeah, to try and make them look better and try and sell it. Yeah, there's one up there has been cut in a point. That one's been cut. That whole group there have been cut back. So at one point this plant wasn't growing very well at all, but not in my care. Since I got it, the leaves are not getting brown tips. They're not dying back. Yeah, so it's okay now. Why it wasn't before, none of my business. It wasn't my plant then. So this one's coming on nicely. Putting out a hell of a root system this year too. It's never done that before. It's never grown such a good root system as it has this year. It's really taken off, that one. So I'd say the health of that plant is good. The look of it is not brilliant because of the chopped off leaves. And eventually some of the oldest growths on there are going to start dropping leaves. Like this one you can see is yellowing. That's got a ring on it. Panic. Let's take the plant out and set fire to it. It's an old leaf. The worst comes to the worst, I'll cut it off. As soon as you see soggy stuff, that's a different ball game altogether. But stuff that's dry, brown tips, brown marks, it's not normally the end of the world. You don't need to set fire to your plant. Not yet. Maybe in a week's time. What else can we look at from an oncidium point of view? Let's find something totally different. This brassia here, if I wanted to take a quick look at this, it had a lovely spike on it, blooms were absolutely enormous, and I could see a new growth. So I thought, oh, that one's okay, I'll choose that one. Now let's look closely. First of all, it's absolutely smothered in aphids. Would you have spotted them? You can see their outline there against the light, yeah? Would you have spotted them? Because by taking that plant home, you take them home and put them with your other orchids, yeah? I knew they were there, Sarah told me, and I thought I'll live with it. They're not that difficult to deal with. But they have made a mess of the leaves a little bit. And looking at this plant now, what have we got here? We've got the oldest bulb is leafless down here, yeah? It's also a bit deep in the pot. But again, when I looked at it, I thought, you know, that's a bit, it's on the slope again, it's on the climb. And most of the good roots that were there 6 months ago when they were new, yeah, have died back. They've got dry, basically, simple as that. So I didn't worry too much because I knew I'd repot it eventually. That leaf's been cut off, probably got damaged in transport. That one's been kinked, it's probably been rubbed up against something or pushed up against something. This one's got a nasty kink in it, yeah. Now what have we got? The second bulb nearest the back of the plant's got 2 leaves, small leaves, not as big. The next bulb's only got 1 leaf. It looks like it only ever had 1 leaf. That's interesting. There's no sign of a second leaf on that bulb, but the bulb was a bit bigger. In fact, it's got a silly little bract leaf down the side. That's not the same thing. These 2 leaves come out the top. This has got 1 leaf coming out the top and 1 little bract leaf out the side. Yeah, that's where that was on that particular bulb. Yeah, I should just pull off. Yeah, there we go. Right, moving forward then we get to the next bulb. This is the one prior to the one that's bloomed. Now this looked like once upon a time it had 2 nice big good leaves and a bigger bulb. So it was progressing at this point. This probably got damaged. It's the trouble with nurseries, people bash things around, not necessarily the staff either. I've seen the public knocking plants over and kids bashing them with stuff and people whacking them with their backpacks and all sorts, so it happens. Anyway, it progressed to there. Did that bulb bloom? No. Now I'm quite confident that these have been grown from seed and they're Sarah's, so that I think these have been grown at Burnham's. Whether they actually got one of her plants was actually pollinated in the nursery and the seeds produced in the nursery, I don't know. I don't remember whether they've actually got a lab where they do their own seed. But if she'd produced the cross and got it registered, then she could have sent the seed off. There are places where you can send your own seed and they'll send you the flasks back, at cost obviously. So anyway, I think this is one of Sarah's. And then we get to the point where it bloomed. So the latest bulb, 2 nice leaves this time. So these were probably produced relatively recently. It's got a nice plump bulb, not shriveled like the previous ones. And what caught my eye was the fact that it's shooting out here. So I do have a brand new growth. And what I've just noticed is under that brand new growth, I've got brand new roots. So that's going straight out in the kitchen now. Now that I've seen the new roots, that needs getting in a pot. Hopefully, some of these dry roots might actually survive going in media, if they go in nice loose media. But they are incredibly brittle and dry. But it is a branching root system. It's capable of branching. Oh, there's actually one with a growing tip down here, just the one I can see. But some of the other roots, a little bit farther back, did go down in the pot, and they've gone all round the back there. And then round the other side, some of this same massive set of roots have actually gone down. They're not only branching, but they've got down in the pot. So from this area, we've got dried up roots and roots that have got into the media. That will be fine. So what do we do when we repot this? The first thing we do is cut that spike off. That's coming off now. And then we get the whole plant under the tap and give it a good wash and get the rest of the aphids off. I don't know whether this is actual dead aphids or whether it's aphid poo, but the leaves are sticky. They need a good clean off, and they need to get the bugs, the insects actually off as well. Give it a good clean up, and I'll be interested to see what they're actually potted in. It looks like it's just bark, quite honestly, but who knows? There could be some other stuff in there. I bet there's some polystyrene lumps in the bottom of the pot or something like that. So I know Sarah uses that as crocking. I'm not too keen on that. It weighs nothing. It doesn't add anything to the pot as far as keeping it upright and stopping it falling over is concerned. But nonetheless, this is in the Oncidium Alliance. You can just tell by the look of it, quite honestly. But yeah, that's going out in the kitchen now, and we'll get these nice new ropes. You can see it's at an angle. I'll take the oldest bulb off, the one that's sunk in the media, and when I pot it, I'll turn it over like that. Yeah? So that some of this goes in the media. I'll leave it quite high, but not too high, but I want this bit sat on the media and the rest of it just tailing out behind somehow or other. I'll sort that out in a minute. So, but yeah, just going over the health of the plant. The overall health of the plant is quite good. It's seen some hard times, but it's okay. I mean, there was a choice of quite a few of these. This was the one I chose. So in theory, unless I'd been on the old source, which I hadn't been because I had the car, then I'd have gone through the processes, like in that video I showed you a while back, and picked the one I thought was going to be the best. And don't forget, I don't always pick the one that's the best now. I'll often pick the one that's going to be the best soon, or even later. And that was what caught my eye, the new growth. It's the only one. Yeah. Now, strictly speaking, that is a split, because both of these growths have come off the same bulb. So this has now got two leads, one behind the other. But while this one is pushing on, this one will probably shoot again. It may even split. I doubt it. But this one will produce the next brand new growth. This is a split from this bulb. That's good. That's just the analysis. That doesn't make it a more healthy plant necessarily. So things to watch out for with Oncidiums is stuff that's unusual for the plant, especially if you had your plant a while and it suddenly starts doing stuff different, like the latest growth blooms and then fails to produce a new growth. There's something not right. There's something not pushing that new growth when it should be. So I've just seen a spike I've bent up in there, two in fact. Yeah, so leaves suddenly going pale that you don't attribute to bright light. I mean, if you look at the colour of this plant here, it's incredibly wishy-washy. That's been right up against the glass to get it to do this. Yeah? Now it's not. Chances are some of the colour will come back to this, slowly but surely. This one again, that was right up the back of this shelf. That was in bright light. And that was to get it to do this. And it's done it in 3 places, 3 spikes. Yeah? This one up here, that's a nice dark green or darker green colour. Why am I not doing it to that? Because that's only got its new set of growths going at the moment. It's still growing. It's growing new growths. It's not ready to bloom yet. Well, it doesn't need the bright light when it's growing the growths. It needs the bright light to induce the spikes. Yeah? And not all Oncidiums need that. Some of them will be happy in an even light. I've just found I get better spikes if I whack the light up at the point the bulbs are thinking about just pushing that spike out of the base, and get that light up for that period of time, up to the point where the blooms start to open. Don't need bright light anymore. The blooms are here now. You see what I mean? For the sake of the plant, keeping it in the brighter light might be a good idea. But this plant's having a little rest now. Yeah? From the light. Light puts stress on a plant. It speeds everything up, as does heat. A combination of the two is not ideal. Right, where else have we got? This is the other big brassica I bought. That was in bloom. Health of this plant, in the main, not bad at all. The bulbs on this get absolutely... What's that? Oh, it's that cat ear under my nose. Sorry, I got a sudden whiff of something rather nice. This has got spotting. That is typical on some Oncidiums, worse on some, non-existent on others. And it's almost plant specific. It is an infection. I don't care what anybody says. If you put that under a, not under a microscope, under a magnifying glass, every one of those black spots is a little pit. It looks almost as though it's been bitten, and it may have been before I got it. But the spots, the black spots, are a secondary infection. Yeah. So something is affecting the leaf in some way, and then it gets slightly infected. It doesn't matter. It's not going to kill the plant. Some people think it looks natural and actually looks quite attractive. I'd rather it wasn't there, personally. But this one's got new growths coming out all over the place, which is why I picked it. It had the most number of new growths. And it's staying in this pot until after it blooms, because this media is good. It's quite new. I don't think these had been potted up that long ago. So that can stay in its pot. Those new growths can mature, produce their spikes and bloom. And then at the next sign of new growths and the new roots, I have to keep my eye on this one because it's a little bit, I won't say it's deep, sat on the top quite nicely, but it's sat far enough into the media that I can't see whether there's any new roots or not. Because unlike the other brassica, it's not hanging out the side of the pot. But this has got quite deep leaves on, quite deep coloured leaves. It's finished blooming now, it's in its growth mode. Doesn't need the really high light anymore, but it's on the high light shelf on the grounds the pot is so big I can't keep it anywhere else except for on the floor, and I don't want it on the floor. I'll keep knocking it. Yeah, so... Right, let's have a look at something else. What was, to all intents and purposes, a dead plant. This is, what was once, Odontoglossum crispum. It was my pride and joy, and then it got a bacterial infection and I nearly lost it. I ended up with one bulb with a tiny little new growth on, round here, that never grew properly. And I thought, it's going to go down, and then it managed to push another one up, which is growing a bit better. I still don't think it's going to form a large bulb, but what it has done is produce some roots. That's the important thing. Now it can settle down. Overall health of the plant, not far off dead, because despite pushing these growths out, it could keel over at any time. Yeah, because it hasn't got a good root system. And the reserves in this bulb are probably all but used up. Without a root system, how can it replenish the stocks in that old bulb? It can't, can it? So slowly but surely, these new growths are eating that bulb from the inside out. Luckily, we now have some new roots, which will stop that happening to a greater extent and start getting some oomph straight back into the new growth. This won't mature. It might not even get much bigger than that, although it does still have a leaf that is still growing, or looks as though it is. But what I'm looking forward to on this one is the next new growth. And if that can get up to some sort, even if it's only half size, then it's on the mend. Good and proper on the mend. Yeah. What else have we got then? We've had a look at a Miltonia, we've had a look at a Brassica. This Castanier, that's an intergeneric. Don't ask me what's in it. I quite honestly, I don't even care what's in it. I like the blooms. But this one has very large pseudobulbs. And that never liked being in a large pot. Since I put it in a smaller pot, it's doubled its root system. And its latest bulb is not quite as large as the previous one, but it's good enough. It's not far off. And it produced the full set of leaves and the spike. So, okay. I'd love to get 2 new growths at once on that, but it ain't going to happen, I don't think. Right, what else have we got? Miltoniopsis. That's in the Alliance. Yeah. How do you tell the good health of a Miltoniopsis? it's alive. It's not dead yet. These do struggle in here a bit. But if you've got pale leaves on these, you're murdering your plant. These do not like highlight. They should have a greyish green colour to them. They very little shine on the leaves, even when they're new. They're just a grey-green colour. And sign of poor roots on these will be the concertina effect as leaves are pushing on. The stop-start thing, that could be your own watering as well. Black soggy bits around the base where it's been kept too wet and a bit too low in the pot. Brown tips to the leaves, leaves dying back from the tip, too much feed, or the air's too dry. But often if the air's too dry, the plant probably ain't going to make it anyway. But yeah, I mean, given that plant, you know, had fusarium and no flipping roots, the health of the plant now doesn't look bad. If I bought that now, I'd be quite pleased. Got some roots growing, you know, got some nice coloured leaves, got some new growths pushing on. That's not what it was like when I got it. What it was like when I got it got me into the annoyed category. Polite version. Yeah, so Oncidiums vary in colour from quite pale, especially if given high light. Don't worry too much, but don't overdo it. They can burn. They will put up with high light. Certainly the Miltonias do. Twinkles don't need that level of light. They'll bloom without it. So why subject them to it, if you see what I mean? I know the Miltonias are the ones that to me seem to need the highest light, and they need to be pushed up to bordering yellow, but not quite, just a pale greeny colour, yeah? And that normally induces good blooms in them. The Sotoanum is the parent of a twinkle. As far as I'm concerned, that doesn't need the really high light that the Miltonias need, because it's an Oncidium. They can step back a bit, yeah? I suppose if you started in the brightest light you've got, I'd put the Miltonias up in that bit. In the Oncidium Alliance, that's probably the only ones I'd have there. They're up Cattleya sort of light. That's what they like, but not burnt, not frazzled. They need the humidity with it. And then stepping back from that are a lot of the others. Just that stage back, lower than Cattleya. Yeah, just a bit, not a lot. And you might have to vary it. You might think, well, I've had that twinkle 2 years now. It's pushed out 2 new sets of growths and it hasn't bloomed yet. And there'll be a reason, because they bloom well. They just do. It's in their genes. They often put up 2 spikes per bulb. And certainly on one of the parents, I've got 4 spikes on 1 bulb. So they are floriferous. That's a big word for this time of day. What else have I got tucked away in the Alliance? I've got various intergenerics, Aliciara, I think there's one up here. Most of these up here are bits that broke off when repotting that I thought I'd give a try on a mount. But this one here just didn't want to grow in a pot. So I thought we'll try it on a mount. That's, oh, it hasn't got a tag on it. That's an Aliciara, I believe. And it's not a happy plant. See that? Now, if you want to see signs of bad health, there it is. I've got streaks on the leaves. I've got 1 leaf on what was the latest growth that's going over. I've got 3 new growths. The one on the right hand side isn't going to get any bigger. If it pushes another one out, it will. The one in the middle, that new growth, not happy leaves. It's still trying to grow. And now the latest one coming out there, that has all the look about it that it's actually going to get going a bit. And it's also produced some roots now from up this left hand end. This new growth over the right hand end didn't produce many roots at all. So that's an unhealthy looking Oncidium type. So it's Aliciara. What else we've got? See, now this isn't a healthy looking plant, but it's coming on. That's a piece of a twinkle that broke off. In fact, it's 2 pieces. I just stuck them on a mount. Well, they're growing, not at a fast rate yet, but they're only just starting to grow some flipping roots. Give them a chance already. But it will grow on. It's not going to die or anything. Get up this end, we're back into the Miltonia again. Yeah? Now that is right up in the roof. Yeah? It's got some paling on it, but a lot of the leaves are still green. Yeah? But this is a Miltonia. It's actually got spikes coming on it too, somewhere. Oh, there, sticking out the top. One there, and there's another one somewhere. Yeah, one over there. So that one's going to bloom soon. So that's right up in the roof. I can't get that any higher without touching the roof. Yeah? What else? Well, it's a nice Oncidium. It's called a twinkle. They were once called Oncidiums. Now, in the wild, these are often found in full sun, but they do get cooling sea breezes that are also humid. Yeah? So it's not, you know, there is a bit of heat going on here, and there is an incredible amount of bright light going on here, but it's tempered by those cooling sea breezes. So it's not as bad as it would seem on the surface. You know, you're going for your walk and you sort of think, oh look, there's a Tulumnia hanging on the edge of that bush. That's in full sun, you know. And then you stop and think, yeah, but I actually put my t-shirt back on just now. That breeze coming off the sea is a bit nippy. Relatively. Obviously it's not nippy, you're in the flipping Caribbean already. That's where they come from. But that's an Oncidium. Totally different leaves. Fleshy. Succulent. Still an Oncidium. Still needs up the high light end. I'd put on the Tulumnias around the Miltonia mark. So a bit higher than your normal Oncidiums, but they will burn if you get too much sun on them without the humidity. They can only take so much. But they store water well, those, because they've got fleshy leaves. The other Oncidiums have bulbs instead. These don't have pseudo-bulbs as such. They grow from a clump. Yeah? Still Oncidiums though. Yeah, so it's not always easy to tell the health of a plant by its look. You have to incorporate the other things. Has it got a root system that's actively working? Should that root system be working now? Or is it the point where the root system's fully developed, probably with the latest new growths, and there aren't any new growths coming yet? It's going to have a bloom instead. The root system will just go static. It's doing its job, it's not actively growing much, if at all. So you couldn't sort of say a healthy plant is because the roots are growing, because some plants will have periods when the roots aren't growing at all. Yeah, and some of the oldest roots might be dying back a bit. Same with the bulbs, you know. Have all my bulbs got leaves on? Well, over a period of time, they won't have. They will drop older leaves. If you've got a plant with 6 bulbs that is fully leaved with a nice new growth coming at the front, and you come down one morning and all your leaves are on the floor, something's gone wrong. That's not how they drop their leaves. A mass leaf drop is a shock of some sort. That could be a blast of really cold air over a period of time. Hot, dry air will even do it. They'll dump its leaves. So various things can shock a plant. I've heard that dropping it on the floor is a bit of a shock, but as we all do that now and again, they seem to survive that okay, don't they? No, it's not that sort of shock. Yeah, so it's an overall, I think with me it's more of a feel. I can sort of look at a plant and I can feel that it's okay, it's progressing. And others I'll look at and I think, yeah, you're not doing so well, are you? And yet it might look okay, but it's not looking as good as it ought to, given the amount of time since it was last repotted or something like that. But again, it's more a feel than anything, I suppose. But yeah, Oncidium types, most of those don't like to be cold, but the odontoglossum end of the Oncidiums, I mean they're all renamed Oncidiums now, but those that were once odontoglossums are traditionally cooler growers. And they like better air movement to keep them happy than some of the other Oncidiums will tolerate a lot less. I mean, things like twinkles, quite honestly, they'll grow almost anywhere. But then when you start getting towards some of the species, they start getting fussy. And certainly with the odontoglossums, they don't like heat, and they don't like the bright light. Yeah? So where we did the Miltonias and Tolumnias at the front, yeah, and then we had the rest of them stood behind, the odontoglossums are behind those, as far as light are concerned. So you step back another go to get to where the odontoglossums like to be. And then you get an oddity. Here's an oddity. It's a Nelliela. It's virtually a dead Nelliela not that long ago. It got a bad infection on that oldest bulb. You can see it took a chunk out of the bulb, and it took a chunk out of that side of the bulb as well. And I thought, right, you're gone. And then it pushed up that little new growth to the left, and it is a small growth which tried to bloom, and I stopped it. And now it's pushing this one up. That's a bit better. So the health of the plant now is well on the way to recovery. What does it look like? It looks awful. But the health of it isn't awful anymore. What was wrong with that bulb's been stopped dead in its tracks. Cinnamon to the rescue. It will drop its two oldest leaves eventually. The little growth it pushed up is now a small amount of support for the new growth. And the new growth's pushing on. It's a good colour. It's getting some height with the leaves. It's got the right number of leaves on it. And I suspect it will get a relatively small but perfectly healthy pseudo bulb. The next one should be the good one. If this one tries to flower, I'll stop it again. There's not enough plant there yet. I want the strength back in it. Now that one likes to be cool with very good air movement. Keep that one happy. If I wasn't able to provide that, I suspect it would be dead by now. So that's that one. What else have we got lurking down here? I mean, my little rescue ones are over here. I've got my Miltonia that may or may not have a virus. It's got some suspect markings, I'm calling them, but it's got a new growth. I'm waiting to see what that does. If that fails miserably, then unfortunately that has got a virus. These are all little rescues over there. Their health is not lousy, but the plants are, because they lost all their health. They're getting it back now. I mean, this little thing here, that's got quite a nice new growth coming with some new roots. That old pseudo bulb needs cutting off. Luckily it's dry, but it's gone. It serves no purpose. That needs coming off next time I get some scissors out. This one ended up with one old bulb and a little new growth that grew. Now it's trying again. It's coming on. Same with the next one along. One old bulb, one new growth. Now it has a new growth, a second one. Same with the farthest one over there. So they're all coming on. They're not good plants, but they're not unhealthy. They've just had one hell of a setback, but going back a bit, you know. So they're coming back. So they're not necessarily out unhealthy. I must stop. I don't mind bending down. I don't mind getting up, but I shouldn't get halfway down and stay there for any length of time. That doesn't do me any good. Twinkles, Oncidium and the Alliance vary considerably from dark green, quite glossy leaves, to paler leaves, to big strappy leaves, to quite short, leaves compared with the pseudo bulbs. They vary. They've all got a look about them. They all start off at the base with a couple of bract leaves, some of which grow as big as the other leaves. I mean, if you look at this bulb here, the little bract leaf that I call it is this one. They're basically the little bits that shielded the new growth as it started to push out. And they stay behind normally. They normally stay quite small, like this one. Yeah, that's all they do. And then you get the first proper leaf comes out. That's this one. And that's as tall as the leaf out of the top of the bulb. So this has got 4 proper leaves on it, that plant. Yeah, so that's that one. This one over here, see if I can find a new growth. There we go. See, again, you've got the little bract leaves at the bottom, but this one's got a second one before it produced its first proper leaf. And yeah, quite short compared with the rest. But each plant will have a little look about it, and maintaining that long term is what you're after. So if it normally has 2 leaves out the top and 2 nice big leaves out the side, and you suddenly start seeing that some of those leaves are not either not produced or not the size they used to be, it's going down slightly. So you might need to have a think about, does it need a repot? Is the media getting a bit stale? Yeah, something like that. Is it in such a tiny pot that the new roots have gone on the outside of the pot and they're drying? They're not doing their job properly. That will reduce its strength. That will reduce its vigour. That could be why it hasn't got its full set of leaves, or they're a bit smaller. And pseudobulbs on a plant progressively getting smaller, again, something's not quite right. A sudden or more sudden reduction in size after you get it from a nursery is a different thing, because you may never get a bulb as big as the last one that was produced, that produced the flower spike, which you went, "Ah, pretty bloom," and brought it home with. Yeah, that may be the largest bulb you ever see on that plant. You'll never see one that big again. But nonetheless, if they're plump, the right shape, right number of leaves, and produce the spikes, then that's how it's going to settle down in your environment, and that's what you will maintain. Yeah, so look out for stuff going backwards. Look out for stuff that's not doing as well as it has done, and to find that out you have to have had the plant a while. So it's no good getting a plant home and a month later panicking because it's going downhill. It may well be, but it's not a long-term thing. There's something more fundamentally wrong if a plant goes down quickly. And often it's just nothing more than the shock of the change of environment, because it's often not just that one. It's left its growing environment where it was brought up to blooming size. A lot of times it will then have been transported, bashed around, possibly left without water for a while, or drowned, yeah? And then it's put in a totally new environment, and then that might happen yet again, but if not, then somebody's going to come along and buy it. They're going to stick it in their car on the back seat with the sun coming in the window. Yeah, you can frazzle a plant just driving it home. That sun straight in through that car window will burn your leaves in half an hour. Yeah, so watch how you transport them. That doesn't mean to say they didn't get transported badly the previous time. So watch your transport, you know, try and keep things shaded. Get some drafting around your car, get some windows open or something, or get the aircon on if you've got it, that sort of thing. And, you know, if you've just gone to the nice garden centre and you bought yourself a couple of orchids, or the fairies put them in your basket and you ended up with them on the back seat, that's not a good time to go to lunch. And then on the way home think, oh, let's stop round and call in on so-and-so and leave the car parked out in the road in full sun. Yeah? Think about your plants. Get them home first, then go to lunch. Or better still, not buy them until after lunch. But yeah, transport can provide quite a shock. But Oncidiums, generally speaking, are pretty easy going. They don't need the highest of the humidities like other plants. They need some, but they'll get away with less than others. Some of the species are a bit more fussy. The Miltoniopsis are more fussy, along with their close relative Nelliela. I'm sure that's related. But yeah, they're pretty easy going. I'm still pretty confident in my mind that the most easygoing and rewarding of the Oncidium whole alliance are the Tolumnias, because of their sheer small size and number of blooms that you get on the spikes, plus branching spikes and all that sort of stuff. And the twinkles, because the twinkle, you not only get the weight of numbers with the blooms, such a variety of colours, but you get that fragrance as well. And both of those types of plants are not enormous. Some of the brassicas, this is big stuff. That ain't going to fit on your kitchen windowsill, is it? you know, the pot itself's a foot tall to accommodate the flipping beastie. Sotoanum, a giant. Twinkle, not so bad. Yeah. So, and quite honestly, this little species Oncidium here, that's a small plant. Health of that plant, let's do that one. Let's see if I can put it down somewhere because the spike's waggling. Right. It's had 2 bulbs taken off, I think, since I got it. This is what I mean. That's one of the bulbs produced by somebody else. Have I ever achieved a bulb that big? The answer is no. That one was quite a bit smaller, which worried me a bit. Then it produced this one, that bloomed. Now it's produced one exactly the same size, and that one's bloomed. So in my care, that may well be the largest the bulbs are ever going to get. And that will be it. That's what it does. One growth at a time, mature, bloom, and then do it again, and then repeat. Yeah, I may never see a bulb that big again. That is rather attractive, isn't it? You can see why I grabbed that one when I saw it. Anyway, I've just occurred to me that this video is probably now far too long, given it wasn't meant to be. But it's a chatty one. Lots of little snippets of things in there that I've sort of discovered, or information I've acquired over the years. I've been looking after Oncidiums for a very long time. First of all, obviously, Phalaenopsis. I then had a Shari baby. Well, this is going back a long time, and a Cattleya. And then gradually, as I started collecting more plants, the Oncidiums were the ones that got hit the hardest, because they were the ones that had the variety of blooms and colours in the sort of places where I went shopping. And I stopped getting the Phalaenopsis, and I started getting more and more Oncidiums. You don't very often find a Cattleya in a supermarket round where I am, but you find Oncidiums and the Alliance, loads of them. They're everywhere. So they started building up in numbers quite dramatically. And at first I didn't find them very easy. I had to work on it. What am I doing wrong? But don't forget, I wasn't growing out here then. I was growing on my windowsills. And some of the time it was, they were facing north. They didn't get enough light. Sometimes they caught the sun, and that didn't do them any good. You learn. You learn as you go along. And of course, then once I really got the bug and started getting really interested, the learning changed shape. And instead of learning by practice and failure and success, I started reading. I started looking other things up. I started looking up the YouTube stuff to see what other people were doing. And the knowledge gain is so much faster doing it that way than it is by practical experience, because sometimes it can take a year for anything to happen. Whereas an evening sat in front of a computer or some sort of thing like that, you can learn a vast amount very quickly. Some of it may not be of any use to you, but you get going. I just noticed Frosty Dawn's just opening up as well. Let's twist that round where I can see it then. Just opening up. Just an odd bud, that is, on an old cane. No, I'm more interested in that new cane round there. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. There's some little tips in there about Oncidiums, but they are pretty easy in the main. The Odontoglossums are perhaps not so easy because of their need for cooler, faster moving air. But in the main, they're pretty easy going. And apart from the bacterial rots and things like that, and really bad bug infections, they're pretty hardy go. They're pretty sturdy. They don't go down easy, So, and multitude of colours, shapes, sizes. Yeah? So, if you like the strappy, grassy type look of plants, rather than the big fat sort of leathery plants of your Phalaenopsis, then give them a go. Some people love the look of a Phalaenopsis plant. I don't particularly. I find them a little uninteresting. I won't say boring, they're just not as interesting as... it's probably because they just grow a leaf out the top every now and again, and they don't progress. You don't get the new growths and the bulbs and all that sort of thing. I like that. I like to watch things grow. And a Phalaenopsis growing well is going to produce a good set of leaves out the top, keep its old leaves, produce some new roots. It's still going to do that growing thing, but not in the same manner. It's like my Vandas. They grow okay, but it doesn't show because they just produce leaves exactly the same as the other ones sticking out the top. And you suddenly realise that this time, when your orange one blooms, those buds are touching the roof. The plant hasn't changed. Yes, it has, hasn't it? It's probably 3 inches taller than it was last year when it bloomed. The plant keeps getting taller, and the hook hasn't changed. So it's now reached the roof. So I need to do something about it, which means the bottom of the plant's going to have to come down a bit, which means the roots are going to get tangled in even more things. So things change. Anyway, a few tips, a few sort of things, a few problems I've had, and you know what I do with the Oncidium types. And quite honestly, they just get dotted around the place and left to get on with it. They don't get a lot of care in the true sense. They don't get mollycoddled. They just get left to get on with it. Watering these, when you've got lots of new growths going on, they shouldn't get dry. They'll drink a lot. And that's irrespective of time of year. That's what the plant's doing, not what the season says, because they can be growing at any time almost. But they will have periods when they're not growing, and I find that allowing them to dry when they're not actively growing keeps the roots. Yeah, keeping them a bit soggy when they're not using that moisture, you can lose roots. Some easier than others. Again, back to the Miltoniopsis. Keep them soggy when they're not growing, you probably get root rot. So have a go. They're good fun. I love the Oncidium Alliance, but not as much as my Dendrobium. I don't think anything will ever take over those, you know. But see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. That's killed off another couple of requests, merging them all into one there, really.